Hello. Thank you. It feels great to be back home. It's not so good to speak about after insiders because they have already partially taken my points. But here we go. So I'm going to develop basically one point. And my point is that focusing on the technicalities, on the legal aspects, on the economic, social consequences, on the conflicts around power and legitimacy, on the relationship of the Spanish state with its territorial units around this conflict is crucial. But this whole conflict and what is happening now cannot simply be understood without referring to the pressures from below that social movement actors and civil society organizations have been putting on Catalan institutions to push the referendum independence further. I start by the end, by showing us our product. As Carlos mentioned before, it has already been published. Even for academic standards, there is something been going on in Catalonia for ages that institutions have been deaf to, and someone has got the impression that something big, really big, was going on there. So let me show you how this sort of our project started. It started in 2004 at the very peak we saw from the trends of Guillem of sort of support for independence, and we were having a coffee in that square, and we saw that. So our my former supervisor, now boss, Donatella, mentioned, so why those two flags? And we were like puzzled. We said, like, look, I mean, there is a huge divide even within the whole process, the Catalan movement. These two flags have really different ideological, symbolic underpinnings behind, and there is a huge internal confrontation. And despite that, 1 week later, they managed to get 2 million people out to the streets. Well, and then we said, we definitely need to study this. Something big is going on there. So this picture, the overall point is that, and the idea we develop in the book, the idea of referendums from below, emphasizes the fact that referendums are no longer devices that are used to legitimate ex ante technocratic and political decisions made by an elite, but they are increasingly used by social movements and civil society actors to advance their aspirations and to influence policy-making processes. And they do not only launch, promote, initiate them, but they also penetrate them mostly through mass agitation over the time, and especially through street protest. The overall point is that the strategies of the Generalitat, the conflicts between politicians, the legal technicalities do not adequately explain the fact that 2.3 million people voted in a non-binding massive consultation in Catalonia in 2014. The institutional side of politics does not explain the fact that more than 500 municipal-level referendums on independence have been taking place across municipalities in Catalonia since 2009. The institutional side of politics does not explain the fact that hundreds of thousands of people have been resorting to the streets in Catalonia since 2010, claiming for a referendum on independence. And here is where our contribution comes in. This is the first, probably massive mobilization. It gathered around 1 million people. They mentioned the failed reform of the statute, so it was a reaction against that. Important. It was a very symbolic event because it was organized by a civil society organization, Plataforma pel Dret de Decidir, and importantly, they sent politicians to the back part of the demonstrations. It was the first time that the politicians were not at the head of the demonstration, meaning that you do not take the lead of this process anymore. We civil society actors are now in charge of the process. In 2012, even a major demonstration that gathered between 1.5, 2 million people, organized by the ANC, another key actor, the National Catalan Assembly, under the call Catalunya, a new state of Europe. Note the deliberate attempt in the framing. Managed to gather a vast amount of people. 2013, they mirror sort of the Baltic performances. And again, the ANC called for an event that basically consisted of a human chain around 400 kilometers of the coastal line of Barcelona, gathered 1.6 million people. 2014, Roger has already mentioned it, 2 million people gathered in Barcelona in order to claim for the referendum to take place, that eventually a non-binding referendum took place 2 months later. So even if the boundaries of institutional and extra-institutional politics tend to blur as the cycle of contention unfolds, and even if institutional actors have been crucial throughout the process, we haven't spoken about the parties, also the Generalitat, also institutional endeavors, such as the Association of Municipalities for Independence. But this whole process cannot be understood without the pressure from below. The level of resilience of Catalan population on the 1st of October, the level of resistance, and the level of actual mobilization and self-organization can be only explained because of the fact that what happened 1 week ago and what is still happening is part of a broader cycle of contention that has been taking place in Catalonia at least for 7-8 years now. And it's a cycle also that mirrors an increasing tendency that we observe among social movement and civil society actors to resort to these institutional devices of direct democracy, such as referendums, to advance their claims. For instance, just final reference, we compare it with the Scottish case, and we observe that even though it was initially an endeavor launched by the SNP, it eventually led to mass mobilization on the side of social movement actors. You simply cannot understand the result of the referendum without referring to the radical independence campaign and the canvassing efforts they did throughout the Scottish most deprived neighborhoods. So, and we extrapolated even beyond the actual territorial conflicts, but I leave it here. Thank you very much.